Professor Rob Dew is a traveler, educator, and local leader in the Occupy movement. He is an active participant in Venice Neighborhood Council and is most well known for teaching his course, Mass Media and Society, at Santiago Canyon College. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Yeah,
We had class last night. Class has gotten much better. I've gotten better at it, as you do when you do things a lot. Um, they have their final projects. I'm sure you remember that.
I do.
Yeah, what was your topic?
I remember mine pretty vividly. It was on global consciousness. And I don't know if you remember the reference. So this would have been in 2016, and social media wasn't as prevalent as it is now, at least in my eyes. But one of
Yeah,
the references was how everybody with this phone in their pocket is almost, I was comparing it to a neuron in the brain. And this system is now on a worldwide level to where if there was a tsunami about to hit Indonesia, there could be someone that has access to information across the globe sends a message to the other side of the brain, in quotes, warning,
hmm
kind of a
that's
system.
quantum, isn't it?
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely quantum.
because yeah, and we actually have physical evidence of that. That what you described did happen in China when the earthquakes in China hit a few years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago.
Are you
Twitter had.
referencing the one in 2011 in
Yeah.
Japan?
No, in China actually, but I'm sure it was true in
Oh.
Japan. Twitter had it way before the I mean, Twitter was on it, and people were sending information way before the government or the traditional press.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because now you recognize the formal news outlets are pulling information off of Twitter, which would have already surfaced potentially 12 hours prior. And
Yeah, I've noticed this that the sports programs that I occasionally watch, like on the NBA, they will reference Twitter as well. Like, what are people out there saying? And they usually have cherry picked them for humor, but it's just interesting that this outsider media has come into the center in its thoughts, its functions, its rules are now fodder for conversation. They're in the club. They're part of the national discourse.
absolutely. And not only a tool that the citizens use, but business models on the back end now are flooding money into it and building these different advertising models. And you see a lot of journalists and major news outlets fishing for eyeballs because they recognize they're not the number one anymore. And they're doing this through clickbait oftentimes, which is misleading. And it's all about tracking the data on the web page and getting some eyeballs on there.
That's right. Everyone's fighting for your attention. What is the quote that I believe I used to begin class with? One of them was a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of rings a
Or
bell.
it can. It doesn't
Definitely
have to,
true.
but it can.
Definitely.
So you mentioned consciousness. What does that mean to you? I'd like to understand, just as we get to know each other again, I'd like to understand. I do vaguely remember your speech, but I'm curious what that means to you and how that pertains to your show.
Consciousness. Well, not directly. I haven't thought about it deeply in a while, but generally, consciousness. There's a line that is hard to define when it actually begins and when it ends. Personally, I'm not someone that is convinced of an afterlife per se. I think that energies just transform, and currently we're running our meat vehicles right now that have to have an input of X energy to produce an output.
Hmm.
And when that starts on conception, and I mean, that's a whole nother topic with abortion of when the baby's conscious per se. But then through the course of your life, consciousness, it ties in the ideas of free will, whether you're just a puzzle piece in a machine that's already predestined, or are you actively in control and conscious of your decision making on a day to day, a week basis, putting forth a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
there's so many different elements that go into it,
Sure.
biology and your genes, your environment. But I'm a true believer in chance tying into
Okay.
consciousness. Just meeting someone at a coffee shop by
Sure.
they could have finished brushing their teeth a matter of 5 minutes before or after they could have hit this red light, and just by virtue of timing, you end up meeting someone that could potentially change your life or change your outlook or your perspective.
So you're a great believer in randomness.
I am.
And I have a story for that that just occurred to me. And have you read the work of Paul Coelho?
I have not. Don't ring a bell.
He wrote a book that was rather famous called The Alchemist. And it's rather simple fiction. I believe he's Brazilian. It's simple fiction. It's a parable. It's a fable, and it's about a shepherd, and he leaves, and all these various things happen. But the whole story is a parable. It's an allegory for how to approach one's life. And in one of his later books, he says that his theory is that when you forget your keys or you do something stupid in your regular routine, which throws you off 5 minutes, that it's actually a time correction that's stopping you from having an awful occurrence, perhaps even a car accident, or setting you up to encounter someone. Now, that leads to the question of, do you believe in a moral universe? Zach Brown, do you believe in a moral universe? In other words, I mean, if you say what goes around comes around, that's a belief in a moral universe, is it not? At the extreme end, you have religion, which constructs an entire, you know, theology around these rules. But do you believe in a moral universe? You mentioned randomness, but in other words, is the universe keeping score, and some guy's got it coming?
So I think they coexist simultaneously,
Okay,
and I do not
way to
think the
dodge the
universe.
question.
Yeah, no, no, no. No. Listen to this. So I don't think the universe is keeping score. But when you say what goes around comes around, I think it's a pattern of behavior that people in a social construct, whether it's in your household, at your workplace, or a society at large, if you are behaving a certain way over a certain period of time, you're gonna you're gonna create certain sets of outcomes that could be deemed positive by the social constructs that we create. So I do believe that humans have set forth this moral universe, which I totally believe in.
I agree. I agree.
And I'm agnostic, and I don't really know. You can't answer the question that's faith based, with a creator and some sort of moral fabric on top of something that we just created, because that's my belief, is that we created it. But I think we do need to still weigh that moral fabric and heavily, like we need to take it seriously and recognize that being a good person, whether you're religious or not, is very important. And
Hmm.
that's kind of how I live my life. I try to be good and make good decisions consciously, not because I feel I'm going to go to hell or there's some figure above me that's going to spite down on my actions, but just because I enjoy being a good person, creating positive outcomes, not just for myself, but the people around me.
Yeah, and I think where we can see this manifest is, what goes around does come around. If you put out a general positive vibe and you have a smile on your face as opposed to a smirk, and people do pick up on energy. You know, they do pick up. Dogs are famous for doing this. They can really read people, and if you generally put out a good vibe and follow that, then it generally comes back to you. Of course, bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people, and so forth and so on. It's just a question I've been asking a lot of people lately, and I'm just curious what their answers are. Um, I think, at the level of stars and planets, I don't know that you could have anything that we would discern as morality. But as you stated very eloquently, in the realm of human traffic, in the realm of human society, we do have that. And yet, in our capitalist society, bringing this full circle to some of the topics that you had suggested we cover, in our capitalist society, I would say rather pernicious and greedy and ruthless behavior is rewarded within the political realm, within the economic realm vis-a-vis Wall Street, at the tops of most professions, professional sports, entertainment. I mean, they're playing for a lot of money and a lot of fame, and they play to keep. So it's interesting to rectify that. We, the commoners, are like, what goes around comes around. And at the highest level, it does seem to be a more ruthless game. Your thoughts?
I would agree. And I mean, I'm still a young man. I'm 26 years old. Therefore, I don't have quite as much life experience or wisdom to speak on this matter. But just in the meetings I've sat in and the business discussions, and you bring up capitalistic America and society, uh, kind of rewarding this poor behavior that kind of breaks the moral or ethical values that I believe humans should be base level, and then you build systems on top of that.
Mm,
And it's kind of hard because I think we're still very young in this American experiment. But I like
mm,
definitely not my term. I'm sure you've heard of that before, but we're not as far along as we think. And
mm,
technology wise, we are, and we're making great bounds and leaps in that regard. But I think what you have is old humans, like old style humans, like our biology, the way our brains work, are still, and from an evolutionary standpoint, caught in thousands of years ago. It was a more simplistic system, and now we have all these skyscrapers in your background and these different technology pieces, and the idea of Wall Street, like making money off money just through investing. And I think it's going to take a long time for people to catch up
mm,
and
mm,
really hold themselves accountable for what I truly believe is the future. And the message I always try to perpetuate is there's a way to get rich and also do it through truly benefiting society. And I've talked about this on just a quick example on one of the previous episodes is it morally equal for um, someone who's drilling oil out of the ground and helping produce these fossil fuels and emissions that we know pretty much deductively now are having an effect on our environment, building a fortune off of that business model, or someone that is cleaning trash out of the oceans? Is there a true difference? Does that matter in not just how wealthy you are in your status in society, but what you did to gain those means? And I really think there is. I think um, it's going to take a long time, but eventually we're going to get to a place, whether it starts off through government regulation, which I think could be dangerous and set certain precedents, or if it's just the knowledge of people, like a baseline. You're not even you're thinking in a certain way to where you wouldn't even weigh the option of, let's say, pulling oil out of the ground or dumping this pollution, like this pesticide, into a river, or using X on a plant that could potentially harm people. But right now, as we see it, it's the balancing of the bottom line and knowing what's right. So if a company has their bottom line and they're trying to increase profits, and they don't 100% know, but they have a good idea that potentially this chemical and this metal or this pesticide on this crop could potentially be harmful to people, you're weighing and measuring. We have people that are employed through us. We have a bottom line. Say we have shareholders. How do we balance a healthy step away from what we know is potentially harmful into something that's
so
not? And
there's the question.
in these complicated
It's
systems we
very complicated. I would make the metaphor that it's like driving a car while you're trying to fix it. You've got once you got the wrench under, get the hood up, and it's very hard to do.
Mhm.
And in fact, I think it's most likely to prove impossible to do. And I think if we're talking probabilities, I think it's far more likely that you will have to have some form of a breakdown, some form of a collapse, or a rather dramatic shift in economic fortune before will see the will collectively by humans and certainly by corporations to want to take the necessary changes that will be needed and to, as you suggest, re-engineer the culture towards, yes, you can make a profit, but towards businesses that almost exclusively do good. How we measure good or how we measure the value of that is very relative and will be open for a lot of debate. But I think that the old model of capitalism that just commodifies everything and just is purely about making profit, and even the very nature of the corporation. If you've seen the documentary The Corporation, it's fantastic and it's a wonderful introduction. You should put that on your list if you haven't, into just what a corporation is, and it operates not unlike the Borg. If you know that metaphor to Star Trek, the Borg,
I do not.
B-O-R-G. Oh,
I
okay,
do
sorry.
not.
Wow, you're a different kind of nerd.
I kind of am.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. But it just it has one mission, which is to make profit, and the nature, the quality of the air, the quality of life of the employees are circumspect to that goal. It has to make profit. It has to achieve, and that just doesn't work for us anymore. We have a whole other set of values. What is this doing for the community long term? Um,
So if
the
capitalism, sorry to cut you off. So if capitalism, in your opinion, is not the answer, or maybe not to the degree of which we weigh capitalism right now, maybe there's a better balance. What solution could you potentially propose? Because then on the flip side, personally, and I hear a lot of talk that people are really scared of socialism and the idea of government.
okay, let me jump into that.
Yeah.
Let's do some definitions first. What you're living through, we call capitalism, but a more appropriate term will be late stage capitalism. Okay, you'll see that term thrown around. The capitalism that we have is far and away from some of the central tenets of capitalism, which are typically laissez-faire economics, where the market decides. Well, for example, just recently, the Federal Reserve bailed out a lot of corporations and hedge funds and bought off a lot of their worst assets right off their books in April of this very year because of the coronavirus. That happened. You can look it up. Okay? Unknown to much of the population, well prior to the COVID-19 crisis, which hit in March, or hit the United States in March. It was around the world before. The United States banking industry was going through a crisis, and starting in September of 2019, the repo market was going crazy. You can look that up as well. You can find all that information. And the Federal Reserve was putting up as much as $105 billion into the repo market to prop up banks. The repo market is the overnight lending program that is one of the internal plumbing systems of the American capitalist experiment. Okay, most people don't know that. So my point is, we're in what's called late stage capitalism, where the rules are a bit skewed. It isn't just a market. Obama years ago bailed out the auto industry. And it was, I think on the whole, it was a good thing to do to not lose those jobs in that industry and so forth. But that's not necessarily laissez-faire capitalism, where, oh, sorry, you failed, you're out, next guy up. Okay? We have a culture of too big to fail. And in where the private sector has engendered, has ensconced, some would say has enslaved the government sector to where its interests are not divisible. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Um, I hope I'm being clear.
No, you are. So I'm just trying to see an end
So,
goal of.
so we're in a late stage capitalism, and so if I was to answer your question more directly, with all this, without all the prenup, I would say that it's not likely for capitalism to solve the type of problems that climate change will present. I'm just giving you my opinion, which is not the most informed opinion in the world. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not an economist. I'm an educated reader. I'm an educator. I have a master's degree, whatever. Um, but based on my understanding of the information, and I'm always open to new data.
Let's on that point real quick. Maybe you can enlighten me on certain. I'm trying to remember precedents set by whether government solves a problem first or the private sector does. And to my understanding, sometimes it's the government that sets the precedent to solve, let's say, climate change or to build the first railroads. And oftentimes they don't do it as efficiently because one of the benefits of capitalism is in the private sector, you're spending your own money. Therefore, you tend to have more of a critical eye on building a system that could solve a potential problem. But what government can do is absorb more of that risk because it's technically
Insolvable, it can't be dissolved.
exactly. And then
Yeah,
when they kind of go through some hoops and make mistakes that the private sector can learn from, then hopefully you have an entrepreneur who can take positive elements of that problem solving model and shift it to the private sector to then maybe get wealthy or help change the world at large and become wealthy from doing it. And that's what I hope
yes, I
with
see
climate
that
change.
becoming wealthy is a consistent theme here on the show. Um, it's an understandable goal for the youth. It's a wonderful illusion, a wonderful carrot to draw you along. I think there are examples of both government leading and leading better and private industry leading and leading better. As you were talking, I was trying to think of how to respond. And I guess I would say that there are also many, many examples of where government puts in a lot of the energy and the hard work and the expenditure, and then those rights and those things. The internet, for example, developed initially by the U.S. military. Um, uh, those things go to private industry for very little money back to the government. I would say that the private industry profits far more off of government and government handouts and government hard work than uh, than than the other way around. Personally, there are great examples of private industry definitely doing a better job, particularly when you get it down to the product level. When you get it down to something that you can wrap in plastic and sell to somebody, that's when you want a corporation. In terms of a service, I would say that's when you want a government. In terms, if you want to provide something that has a baseline of quality that is available universally, like healthcare or schooling or a fire department or a police department, that exists almost universally with slight variations in every place, but as a baseline of competency and service, then government is far better.
Yeah, I would happen. I agree. And you bring up healthcare. I want to touch on that real quick because
Okay.
I do believe healthcare is something that should be universal. Like every
Yes.
U.S. citizen should have it. I haven't tried to completely solve the problem like numerically myself, and that's one of the big arguments is where's the money coming from? How is this even possible? But the idea or the fact of the matter that our healthcare is tied to our jobs is
Yeah.
very dangerous,
It's very
especially
dangerous.
in the pandemic that we have right now. And I hope it sets forth the idea that it's a problem that needs to be solved because the idea of having your healthcare tied to your job is it's dangerous because you lose your job, then what do you do? Or
As people did in this pandemic.
we claim to be so advanced and we are in very like
We're the only
technological and
Western
well-developed.
nation in the world. Sorry to cut you off.
All right, go for it.
We're the only Western nation in the world that doesn't, advanced economy that doesn't provide some, doesn't do a little something for their people. I mean, healthcare is just something that it's a baseline, and it also creates a psychological state of peace. As I age, I'm like, nah, I ain't gonna take that ski trip. I'm not that good anyway. And if I come back injured or broken, it's going to be very expensive. So I think it's atrocious that our government treats us this way, and it's entirely possible. But I think that the reason for this can be largely attributable to one entity on the planet, uh, Zach, and that would be the Republican Party. They are by far the most dangerous institution currently operating, the worst and most ferocious mafia to prowl the planet.
You think so?
Um, yeah, I really do. Not, which is not a praise and not a de facto praise for the Democratic Party as their opposition. They're sort of like the team that plays the Harlem Globetrotters and loses every night, the Washington Generals. So the Republican Party in particular has blocked this because, speaking bluntly, the Republican Party represents the oligarchy, the corporations, and the extremely wealthy of the world. All the other social trappings and the Jesus and all that other nonsense is merely window dressing to convince suckers. They have a singular purpose, which is to propagate the interests of the oligarchic forces. The extremely wealthy, James Bond villain type, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett's, and of course the extremely wealthy corporations. Therein lies the true power. And let's not forget the banks. Therein lies the true power, the true wealth, and the true political power of the nation. And that's who they represent. And those folks are very resistant to climate change because it's not good for business. There is some shifting. Oil companies are receding a little bit. Remember when oil companies used to be like the dominant, it was oil and defense or the dominant, and then the oil companies have lost quite a bit. And your tech companies have now risen to the point, and that brings its own set of issues, which we could get into. But you have had a shift at the table of who is most powerful, most profitable, and therefore most politically potent, okay, in the oligarchy of the United States. How that will play out over time, I don't know. But it has perhaps shifted some awareness towards climate change, some more awareness, but there's still tons of resistance from people like the Koch brothers and other more traditional Republican interests, and some Democratic as well.
So you think the motives of the Republican Party at large is to prop up the oligarchy and
Well, they don't have to prop them up.
yeah,
They just take the checks. And also, one of their other singular objectives, and I think people don't understand this about the political discourse, Republicans don't want to govern. In fact, what they want to do is destroy government or to make it appear foolish or incompetent. And these are stated objectives that you can read about in the Powell memo from 1971. That's a really good document to check out.
So I think we're talking about motives unless you have anything specific that government has actually set forth from the Republican Party to let's bring it back to the healthcare, because to my
Okay.
understanding, at least through conversations I've had and what I've heard, it's the general premise that Republicans at large generally don't like the idea of free things. As soon as you say,
Oh, except when it's free handouts for them.
yeah,
For example, like how about all the bank bailouts? That was free. It was free to them.
yeah,
Wasn't you or me that you and I paid for it in the form of higher rents from 2008 on.
you are not wrong. And I think
Thank you for that.
I
I
think
mean that
I
band
like to
that
be
they, I
careful
mean,
when I,
in many ways you can see what's the coming financial, I believe, a very potentially crisis that is an offshoot from the COVID-19 situation in the summer and all this. It's really a continuation of what went down in 2008. As empires start to crumble, as the financial basis for things, as borrowing from Peter to pay Paul becomes ever more stressful. At first, it's easy, but then as it becomes ever more stressful, and you get a break, like a COVID-19, a genuine black swan event that hits you from left field, this is when you will see financial systems potentially topple, or an experience a deep irregularity, which is a wobble, which is eventually hard for them to overcome. It may not be the event that takes them down, but it creates a overcompensation. And so for the last 10 years, the Fed, operating under capitalism, which I reframed as late stage capitalism, has essentially given tons of money to the markets, to hedge funds, to corporations. They haven't done it universally. Obviously, Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns went out of business back in 2008. Okay, but they've continually propped up the market and just printed money now into the trillions. Something that can't go on forever never does. When will be that day when that can no longer happen? That's a more in-depth discussion, but it's something interesting to think about, especially as a 26-year-old man who likely has to live through the consequences of these decisions for the rest of their life.
It's a valid point, and I'm not educated enough to speak about how to fix the Federal Reserve, and it's, I imagine, a very complicated issue. But the fact that we do print money, and the fact that through COVID bailouts, for example, this year, that will increase inflation in my lifetime and in Grant's lifetime,
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah,
that's
your generation, I mean, I guess you're kind of tail end millennial, right? You're not quite a coronal. I'm calling everybody who's in school right now, to me, that's the coronal generation, because they've had 1 year of their school life pretty effed up by
fascinating
this, random occurrence. So you guys are millennial. You're kind of a tail end millennial. This next group's kind of 23 or 24 and under are coronals. And this will they're going through this right at a crucial time, like high school, and some kids didn't get to have a prom, and freshman year of college, when what an exciting time. It's very dampened and very different from what they've been raised to expect. So I wonder what effect that will have on their psyche.
I was just gonna say, like, the psychology in long term. If I forget who I heard say it a couple days ago, but the idea of risk taking, generally associated with the pandemic, goes down drastically close to the event, and then there becomes a point though where the economy kind of booms because people are so just riled up to make things return to normal. But I want to go back to healthcare real quick. So I think it's important for people to realize, in developing a system where everyone has healthcare, that doesn't mean that the private sector is going to completely go away. I think people should always and will always have the ability to pay for better healthcare. And I like to think of it. I remember one time in a finance class, I was talking to a professor about the safety of a car. If you buy a super cheap vehicle, let's say it's a little bit outdated, it might not be the safest vehicle if you were to get in an accident. But if you buy a top of the line, really expensive car, by virtue, it might have more invested safety technology in it.
Sure.
And the individual in the marketplace should have the ability for that option to get better service. But I do think there has to be some sort of base level. There has to be a baseline system that
well, that would be, your,
like Medicare and
whatever industry, whatever regulatory body supervises automaking in America. There is a baseline on the quality of the brakes, and they have to pass certain tests. Yeah, I mean, that does exist. The same would be true for airline travel. The same would be true for most industries.
Totally. And you brought up the unprecedented event that your students are going through currently. I mean, all of us in the world at large. But I wanted to ask you, have you recognized any differences through the rollout of social media, and just life in general has changed, and you have, I don't mean to age you, but how old are you again?
Ouch.
Please.
I specified this in my rider before that you signed before I came on the show. I'm 53.
53. So you have more life experience than me. And how long have you been teaching?
20 plus. Yeah, 20, 25 years. Yeah, 25 years.
So the pros and cons, have you recognized anything in your students over
the years? Let me address that. That is a question I sort of thought about that you presented to me prior. I would say they're a little more politically aware. Not huge. I mean, they're not activists yet, but they're more politically aware. I would say social media and technology are more pervasive. When I first started teaching the 105 class, which you took, not everybody in the class had a cell phone yet. I think that was like 2010. The iPhone breaks in 2007. And of course, not everyone jumps on it. I jumped on at the iPhone 2. It was a full year before, I got in the game, right? And that's just the nature of technology. There's the date that it's invented, and then there's a while before it becomes a product, and then there's a while before you, and so you have an actual date. Apple has an inception date. Oh, we introduced it the summer of 2007, but then you have a while before it becomes universally adopted, and it can be a couple years in between all of those. So I've noticed that the students are more tech savvy, generally have gear. This isn't universal. Obviously, this breaks down along economic lines. I also see that there are significant gaps and disparity between what people have. Some people have the cheap HP laptop, which barely functions for Zoom conversations. Other people have the Mac, you know, or
Is this
something
something
nice.
that you've experienced in general, or like actually in your classroom? Because I want
Well, in
to,
the classroom, I'm teaching completely remotely now.
I understand now, but I mean, just over the course of your teaching
Over
career.
the course of the many years,
Yeah.
I would say that also identity politics have become more prominent in the minds of the youth. And usually, going back to our earlier discussion about consciousness, one of the ways that I define consciousness is your awareness of your world and your surroundings, your consciousness of the world in which you inhabit, and then at even a higher level, the wake that you make in that world. Being conscious of your being and your presence and how it affects other people, and how your choices and your habits and your proclivities affect other people. So I've noticed that young people, pretty universally, they're the beginning of the awakening of their consciousness generally happens around identity politics. So it'll be the girl who's, making a feminist statement against patriarchy in Hollywood, or it's a Hispanic male commenting on uh, ethnic diversity in television shows or something like that. And that's fine. And a gay student advocating for those rights and so forth. And that's great. What I try to encourage them to get into is a more broad. So you're not saying, hey, I'm here to fight for people who look and sound and act like me. Or you're just like, hey, I'm here to fight for not even fight. I'm here to work together to resolve something for the good of the collective. You understand the difference?
Absolutely.
Which isn't to admonish or belittle identity politics. I do think it is intro level consciousness. It's somewhat easy to get riled up in service to your own ultimate interests. Can you get riled up in the interests of the collective? I was very encouraged when I saw a lot of white folk joining the Black Lives Matter protests. At least the reasonable ones, not the ones that turned violent or riotous, but the organized ones. I thought that the diversity of ages and race was very encouraging. I thought that was an excellent sign.
Absolutely. And you were kind of diversifying how there's different groups in identity politics that are really just married to their ideas and their group. But you also brought up, and I totally agree with it, I think encompassing that there should be a system of ideals that encompass all of those people, that it's just
Mhm.
about being a good person. So um, I can't blame someone who, let's say, is gay and is fighting for specific rights because it has
No,
direct effect on their life, and that's
they
who
have
they
every
are.
right.
But the point you bring up of just being a balanced individual and not pointing the finger to push the other side further away, there's a way to debate and bring forth change in a healthy manner. And the fact that humans are very tribal in nature, and identity politics, it totally ties into that.
Yep,
Uh,
yep.
It's hard because you're
We see
telling
it in the
people,
political realm, obviously,
yeah, absolutely. And you're telling people to separate their emotions from facts that may exist in the world, that like change needs to be put forth. But
in history.
by virtue of getting so emotionally charged, you
Yep,
actually hurt your cause because you're not thinking about a
make good
solution
argument.
in a
Yeah.
logical manner. But it's hard to tell someone to put
Well,
their emotions completely aside, you know?
to bring it back to our wonderful class together, Marshall McLuhan has this famous statement, which he says, "The electronic age, we now are living in the digital age, which is a compounding of the electronic age, a exponential growth of it. is returning man to his tribal state. When I first read that, I didn't completely get that. But now, in 2020, as we've deepened into, so going back to your question about how have you seen students change? Well, the cell phone was a novelty, in 2007, 8, 9, 10, when I first was teaching that class. It's still a bit of a novelty. It was ubiquitous in our life, but not everyone had them, and not everyone had the good one, and so on and so forth. 2020, everyone I see is completely engrossed in digital reality, social media, news at your fingertips, all of that. So that's one major difference, and that's across the society in my estimation. But I see it in particular in my students, and I see them, maybe having difficulty not checking their phone in class, or as soon as I give a break, that's what everybody does. Everybody reaches for their lover. You have to have it close to you.
Less people communicating with each other
Sure.
outside in the halls and whatnot.
Yeah, going and checking out on what's going on in the world, whatever websites they think are important.
Have you noticed the difference in the ability of like critical thought and argument and people's speech maybe being hindered?
Absolutely, and it goes back to their language, Zach. The limits of your language are the limits of your world. If you can't articulate ideas, if you have a limited vocabulary, say, for example, like our president, it really is about a 2,000 word vocabulary, then you have an inability to articulate complex thoughts. I mean, some of your language has been is very good, and you're able to get into more subtle concepts than just black and white or good and evil. And a lot of people don't have that, and they're trained from a young age, and the media is a part of this. And this is what Marshall McLuhan is saying when he says it's returning man to tribal man, returning modern man to the tribal man. We now have tribes organized around news sources. Somebody's an OAN. Oh, I'm a Fox guy. Oh, I'm a MSNBC.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and so on and so forth. It's not clearly defined. I'm speaking somewhat reductively because it's simpler to advance the conversation rather than parse out all the subtleties. But we do see society descending into these very distinct tribes, and and to some extent, identity politics plays into that as well. And the internet, the electronic age, through no fault of his own, where I'm not saying it's wrong or evil or it's part of the conspiracy, but by its very nature, it's connected people that weren't connected before. So you can type in weirdos who like leather or whatever you're interested in, and a site and a group will pop up for you. And there's blogs and there's videos and there's a subculture. And in a non-COVID time, there might even be live events where you can participate and apply. But
I said I missed that. I missed.
Oh yeah, and we're coming into the worst time of it. Now it's going to be like winter. It's rough time.
Taiwan just had an electronic music festival called Ultra.
Yeah.
Full crowds, tens of thousands of people.
Yep. And did it come off with no problem?
I haven't read into that. I think it was
just. Well, you better find out. You can't be promoing the event and not finding if they weren't a super spreader, because it was an event in super spreader. That's going to be the new put down of the 2020s. You're a super spreader.
Super spreader.
Or just maybe spreader.
The balance of trying to not be selfish, even though you miss going out. And I have not been the perfect socially distant.
So Zach, I came up with a schedule. I should send it to you because it's a really good visual. And I rated people's COVID response from 1 to 10. So if you're a 1, the ones were red, and the below is 6 through 10s were blue. A 5 is right in the middle. A 5 is like a guy who's like, well, I don't know, man. I just lost my job. I got a bandana. He's the guy that doesn't really pay attention. It's not a heavy political animal. A 1 is like a militia person, who's like, this is a conspiracy sent from globalist pedophiles.
Yeah, like the girl that I saw a video, she brought in paperwork to a store.
Yeah.
About something legally where she didn't want to wear a mask, and she was ready for someone to come up, put your mask on, and she had paperwork ready. Like, here's the statute. You can't tell me what to do, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But you're fishing for problems at that point. That's just But
Well,
that ties
it's
into media too, how those
yeah,
extreme cases, they play on our brains a certain way and end up getting the most views and end up going viral. In
good
reality,
point.
the vast majority of people are pretty reasonable, you know?
The digital age is the revenge of the anecdote. The singular anecdote that is remarkable. The Joe Exotic. Remember that show? How that was an amazing show. I mean, we all watched it.
That's how the year
Um,
started.
huh?
I said that's how the year started.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and he was, and that show really took off in part because of the conditions, but he was a really bizarre anecdote that was fun to just spend a little time in that world. Um, but yeah, the anecdote has tremendous power because of the nature of our communication, because it moves, we can pass it around like gossip. I mean, the internet retrieves the gossip line, right? The internet retrieves the game of telephone.
It does, and I'm a little bit more hopeful in um, saying that technology or social media, the internet is kind of putting us back into a more tribalistic sense. I think that might be a fact short term that we're kind of
Uh-huh.
living through these different groups and whatnot, but it's just an experiment that we've never dealt with, and these social media companies that are building these systems with I think most of the time with good intentions, whether you're trying to increase the bottom line through an advertising model where
Sure.
the computer is learning your profile to better serve you content that keeps you on a platform longer,
Well,
which is what's the name of the documentary that was the
Social Dilemma. Have you
social
seen that?
dilemma?
What's your response to that?
I have, and at first I remember actually writing a couple notes in my phone because being in marketing and advertising, a lot of the systems they were explaining, I was already aware of and already very much leveraging to increase bottom line for my clients. And the difference is, though, when you run a sponsored ad and you
Hmm.
build an ad campaign to get more eyeballs on a specific product or service or a profile, you're doing it in more of an old school manner in like an ad agency would do, to where the consumer on that platform is going to be served an ad, and based on how they interact with that ad will determine if they're going to be served the ad again. Like, are you a relevant person on the platform that's paying attention to this product or service? Like, are you in the mindset to buy new shoes? I serve you this ad that happens to be shoes, and you clicked on it, you interacted with it because your mindset prior was already thinking about that potential purchase. I think the important question is, are the systems and platforms changing the world at large? Like, they're the first point in the system.
Unintended outcome.
Exactly. Or in the marketing world, I've thought about this a lot. Are companies kind of just copying or serving people what they want to hear or what they want to purchase or see? And I
Let me
think
let
that
me reframe the question because I think I know where you're going with this. To some extent, yeah, okay. I think first of all things are true, and that's the amazing thing about a paradox that often things that are seemingly in counterpoint can be also simultaneously true. I think I asked my students this question recently: is there a conspiracy? Did someone have a plan and mapped it out to some would say enslave the planet? We certainly are enslaved by our phones. I think we can dispense with a debate about that. Most my students say that if they forget their phone when they leave the house for some reason, they're going to turn around and go back,
mhm.
even if it means being late to work. Okay, this is something that is a must-have, I think, for most of us. Keys, wallet, phone. So moving on from that point, um, was it a plan? Was there intention behind it? Or, as you were kind of outlining, it's just being a good customer or being a good corporation, you're going to take advantages of the available technology to maximize your imprint in the marketplace and greater ensure your chance for success. Yes, I mean that's what business is. That's what capitalism is you're going to take advantage of existing tools, and very often great capitalistic enterprises, I'd say more often than not, began by advances in technology. One company comes along with a better widget because they make them out of copper instead of aluminum or whatever, and they surge in the market, and that company is ascended. So I think that, I mean, the social dilemma really gets into this. And, those guys, I haven't finished watching it. I need to, and I'm probably going to eventually incorporate it into the 105 class. I think it's really great, what I've seen of it. And I think it's really shocking. And so, to revert back to your question about how students have changed, I would say the students that I'm encountering are also now coming to my class much more aware about the proclivities and dangers of media and media consumption, including social media and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to reference back to your earlier questions as materials coming to me. So I think they're more aware, and I think films like Social Dilemma are making that so. In Social Dilemma, I think it really does beg the question: did these guys know what were doing and did it anyway? And do they did it purely for profit, or do they have some other sort of nefarious end?
Well said. So where I was getting at is the system from an advertiser. Like when I enter the app to increase a client's bottom line, for example, that's not necessarily the problem in, let's say, a Facebook or Instagram system. It's what would be on the organic side of the platform. That's
Mm.
what they call it in the advertising world. That's
Mhm.
how long is the person on the app. We're building the system to keep their eyeballs on the screen as long as possible so they're served more ads. Therefore, we get paid more. So
Absolutely.
that's where the problem happens, or that's where it was occurring, is because you're manipulating people's brains necessarily to
Hmm. Hmm.
into something that's not been created before, to have
There's
their
another.
eyeballs on the phone as long as possible. But
Yep.
I also always like to encourage people that you have to be a responsible consumer. So you brought up the fact that this documentary, I think, is totally going to have an impact, and
It already is.
absolutely.
It's spawning think pieces in response to it. I'm sure at some point someone will come out and try to maybe refute it or counter it or something. You always have that. There'll be a right wing conspiracy version of it that will have the devil and the Clintons involved somehow, and um,
It's
these sort of, you like that one, huh? These things happen. They offshoot, and they happen in response to any powerful piece of media that's widely accepted. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, now that that thought is out there, everyone is much more suspicious. Again, my students are much more suspicious of media, um, and of social media and so forth and so on. And they come into the class that way, and they certainly leave the class that way. They've let me know that I've ruined some of their illusions. One of the students said that I made their innocence obsolete, which of course I took great pride in.
we'll have to talk about that, because my initial message to you was uh, kind of referencing the innocence per se, at least where I was at in my life when I took your class, of being naive to certain things that the government does on the back end. Because I'm a very optimistic person.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, you have an interesting and I think powerful demeanor, Zach, because you do present very eager and innocent. You know what I mean? Like, you ask these questions, and when I throw darts at you, you don't necessarily react. You're in your space, and that's a wonderful quality. I compliment you on that.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I'm trying to do my part here through the podcast, and I
Yeah,
think open forum conversation is something that's
we've
critical to
certainly had
solving
that.
problems. It's gotta. That's the only way I think you truly change people's psyche, or at least give people the opportunity to speak their minds, not through typing on a screen or watching CNN or Fox, but just having open forum conversations about issues that deserve more than a 3-minute soundbite.
And that was one of the reasons why I agreed to come on the show. So I thought maybe, I would present that.
No, I appreciate it. So there's one thing that stuck out to me in class,
Okay.
it was in the PR world, and it was when I forget the name of the cigarette brand tried to gain the entire female market through
Yeah.
the torches of freedom.
Well, this was
And
the story that you're referring to is Bernays, Edward
yes,
Bernays.
yes,
All right.
Sigmund Freud.
Do you have your document? Do you have your class booklet?
I don't. I tried finding it and I could not find
I
it.
know. I bet you. I knew a lot. I bet a lot of students they go, "Oh, whatever happened to that thing?" Because there was that really cool thing in there they've never found ever again. Well, the story goes that Edward Bernays, I think this was around 1919,
Yeah, in the
in
20.
a parade in New York. I can't remember the parade. It might have been an Easter Day parade. Anyway, he had hired some debutantes, some young, attractive women, unmarried, to walk down the street, and they whip out from their legs a cigarette during the parade. And at a very opportune moment, they light a cigarette in public, which was considered taboo, which was
Yeah, for
considered,
people to do.
it'd be like, I don't know, I mean, mooning, walking down the street and mooning someone. It's just not something you do. And they had a line prepared, and the line was lighting torches for freedom. And Bernays had positioned there photographers, and they photographed it. And this was the age of the newspaper. So these went in the New York Press the next day, and then a couple of days later, they went out to the rest of the country. Photos of these women saying, with the quote, lighting torches for freedom. So you're evoking the Statue of Liberty, which has a giant, cigar in her hand, really, in a certain way, right? It was right around the time of the women's suffragette movement. And for women who were fighting for equality in that time, trying to get the right to vote, which they've only had for 100 years now, starting in 1920 in the United States. Um, it was just it tapped into their hidden desires, and that's what makes a successful ad campaign. And that's what we talked about in class: is that advertising the 20th century doesn't appeal to your rational brain; it appeals to your irrational brain. And I would argue that that is true also for political campaigns. The journalism in this country doesn't cover politics; it covers politicians. It's not interested in policy; it's interested in the horse race. And what did he say about his opponent? And that's generally true across both political lines. I would like to think that the left does a little bit better job, but they tend to really give the people, to some extent, what they want. And this raises up a good point, which has kind of popped in my head a couple times. As we're being critical of our institutions, or I was so strongly and boldly admonishing the Republican Party, we also have to admit that there are weaknesses within us. I mean, part of my pessimism about our ability to respond to the climate change crisis is my knowledge of the American consumer and how much they're very much enthralled with their luxuries and enthralled with your conveniences. And I would dare say that convenience in 2020 has almost become the supreme value of the American culture. Can I get it fast? Amazon will get it to me in a day. Oh my gosh, this service will get it here tonight. Convenience over quality. The MP3, it's a horrible quality, but it's incredibly convenient. You can pass it around. So, will this nation be able to, assuming a leadership would rise, and it starts with that for sure, but assuming leadership would rise and maybe AOC in some future iteration of her political career, will the people be ready to give up? I mean, I think we've seen a consistent record of Americans really balking. They don't even want to fucking wear a mask. A piece of paper on their face. Oh, that's not, you're impinging on my freedom. I
Yeah.
have a right to urinate in public wherever I want.
There is that in a lot of Americans. I was actually just talking to one of my roommates about this last night. The
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, a lot of our founding men and women were people that flipped off England and literally went across the ocean to start their own country in a new world per se. And I think that the trickle downs effect of that, they're in a lot of people. The idea of anything like wear your mask, it's the idea of this government or this higher power telling me what I should
Well,
do. And
And this is an attitude that has been cultivated. I choose that word carefully. Cultivated by the Republican Party, by the Libertarian Party. Okay, this was not by chance. This was absolutely and positively a planned strategy coming out of
it's a
the
planned strategy.
what?
What was a planned strategy?
Disassociate people from their government.
You think so?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me explain. Coming out of FDR and the New Deal, the modern founding of the Libertarian movement, for example, was in 1946, founded by a lobbyist. Okay, and essentially it was promoting all these free market ideals. Essentially, libertarianism is a front for corporations, and that's why they financed it through all of its years. The DuPont Corporation, all these corporations finance quote unquote libertarian think tanks and promoted the idea of libertarianism. They were realizing the old conservative thinking that represented the Republican Party just wasn't holding, and that of course proved even more true once you get into the 60s and 70s. But libertarianism, this idea that I'm an individual and government is really impinging upon my rights. It's presented to the public as an argument for their rights, but what it really is, if you peel away the layers, is an argument for corporate dominion. It means government having no rule over corporations, and they hatched this whole ism, if you will. They hatched this whole idea as to get the public to associate their freedoms and government impinging on their freedoms with corporations being regulated by government. Now, those regulations happen to do a lot of good, like we were discussing earlier, making sure the brake pads on the car are good, making sure that the chemicals that are in your shampoo are not toxic, and hopefully in the future aren't toxic for the environment that they're being washed into through the toilet and the sink. But these regulations have great value, but corporations began to really rebel against them. Let me go back to the history lesson. So we have the New Deal, which kind of ruled government politics, up and all through the 30s and 40s. Later on, you have what's known as the Great Society with Lyndon Baines Johnson. And in direct rebellion to Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society and all the new government relations, that's when we had OSHA introduced. Let's not forget the EPA was created during the Nixon administration. Okay? It's one of the reasons why the Republicans eventually abandoned Nixon. It was the Republicans that got him to resign. Let's not forget that. Because he wasn't the kind of Republican that they wanted to see in office. In fact, today he would rate out as almost a blue dog Democrat or more like a Susan Collins Republican, very, very moderate, as a Republican within the party today. And what they wanted to bring in was much more ideological people who were willing to propagate the ideas of trickle-down economics that we see with Reagan, of this ideas of Ayn Rand. Are you familiar with Ayn Rand? She's very popular with libertarians because she gives the intellectual basis for the rise of the individual against the collective. She seems to give intellectual might to this notion that leave me alone, don't tell me what to do, don't charge me, no socialism, no universal health care, I'll take care of myself like a frontier hero. And all this is really just poppycock. And the movies that are made very often prop up this notion of the American male that he has for himself. And when I'm specifically talking about the characters of John Wayne, the characters of Clint Eastwood, if you see a movie made about a cop in America, Zach, what would we say are the general qualities of that cop going to be? Number one, he's going to be a maverick. He's going to be a rule breaker. You can't tell me. I'm going to go out there and bust that guy because he's a evildoer pedophile. And I'm going to get him. And usually that's the character that the most beloved character within American movies is always somewhat of an establishment authority figure who is also a rule breaker within that society. Would you not agree?
I would. And
Okay.
what popped up too is the heroes and villains.
Yeah, remember the heroes and villains comment. Yeah, exactly. So America has created that kind of hero. The movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Well, Clint Eastwood is still a thief, and as time goes on, a murderer. Now he's killing other murderers for the most part, but and thieves, but he is a murderer and a thief, period. But he's identified as the good. Okay, and very often, bringing this conversation back to American capitalism, that's often how American war efforts are categorized. Yeah, we murdered tons of people in South Vietnam and in Iraq and in Bosnia, but we were doing it for the good. And the same for the businesses and the same for so on and so forth. And very often that good is for the good of corporations. The American population is largely a captive population. They never really gave up their indentured servitude. And the banking system is largely captured as well.
So the original question was, I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember.
sorry about that.
No, this is fine. Whether the government is doing certain things on purpose to separate, or was it the government to separate the people from the idea that like individualism is more important than the government having more power? Don't you think there's a balance between
Yes, yes.
the top
There's a
and
tension.
over?
There's a balance between the needs of the individual and the needs of the collective.
Exactly.
And different people will have different ideas about where that line should be drawn. Some will,
Problem, you know?
yeah, it's a genuine problem, and it's, you could break it down along. If you want to do an XY axis, you have left-right paradigm. In other words, individuals who want to be more progressive socially, you know, and individuals who are more conservative, traditional on the right side, and then you have authoritarian versus libertarian on the X axis, or the Y axis rather. And so you have, are we going to have rules? And then we have rules, and it's like, no, man, leave everybody alone. Versus, I want to be able to be free and express myself and have a gay marriage and all that. Versus, no, more traditional. And these are some. This is not the only. It's a reduction, but it's one of the traditional XY axes that American culture falls on.
Yeah, and that's why I remain so hopeful, because I think humans are just problem-solving creatures, whether it's a global warming or better fixing a capitalistic system that is maybe too extreme, or as soon as we recognize the government might be having too many powers and setting forth regulations over its people, then I hope we can course correct. But with this hopefulness, I'm also weighing and measuring history of governments and civilizations rising and falling. And I want to get your touch on, are you hopeful? Do you think we can course correct, or these problems that we're talking about, anything that is so grave that it's actually going to make our society collapse? Or are we truly living in a society that has never existed? There's nothing like it. There's systems not like it, that we're going to be able to course correct and be okay. It's just going to take some growing pains.
I'll be succinct. COVID-19 was one of the last three nails in the coffin of American empire.
Don't say that. No. You really think so?
I do. And I do from a historical, and I don't mean to dampen your optimism. And let me
straight. Give it to me
huh?
straight.
What's that?
Straight.
Yeah. Historically, empires, and we can definitely say that America is an empire and really has been arguably since the 1900s, in the early 1900s. We were a major world player, obviously a major winner in World War I, and so forth and so on. Empires have a run, nation states, if you will, have a run of about 240, 250 years. This has been studied. You can see it discussed in the documentary, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which talks about, the coming crises and so forth. Now, I will admit there's a great market out there for gloom and doom. People love it. They love it. It's great clickbait. It's all coming down. But I do think there is great historical precedent and great examples drawn in that film that I can separate from the fear porn that's used to sell it, and say that it seems to me quite likely that America will experience sometime relatively soon, probably spurred on by the economic depression that we are staring the face in right now. that America will experience. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a Hollywood movie. It's not like it's going to blow up or the Russians are going to invade and, we're all in work camps or something ridiculous like that. But I think a significant, a significant drop down in quality of life, a significant reduction in the place of America in the world. It might stagger along for a few more decades. I suppose that's a possibility, but I just feel like the historical precedent is empires run a certain course. And then just by the nature of becoming an empire, to maintain said empire, certain choices have to be made. And those choices lead to inevitable consequences, which ultimately lead to the downfall of said empire. Do you understand what I mean?
I do.
Like to make a different analogy, when a corporation starts out as a mom and pop shop, and originally grandma's in there churning the butter, and then pretty soon it's a factory, and then they've got two factories, and then fast forward 20 years ago, it's the grandson who's running it, who's never even spent a day in the kitchen, and he's more concerned about the share price, and he's going to buy back some stocks to drive up the share price, and the CEO is going to cash out with a $200 million bonus. Late stage capitalism. Okay, so things have progressed, things have changed, and they're not as we've been taught them that they are. And I completely lost my train of thought.
That's all right. No. I would describe it as a growing pain, though. Just
Yeah.
Maybe short-term quality of life diminishing. We've already experienced that this year with people losing jobs and
Yeah.
what COVID has done to us. But I'm talking about a dramatic, all-out collapse of what we call
I
the
think it's
United States of
possible. I
America.
don't think it's the most likely outcome. I think it's possible.
Okay.
I don't think it is the most likely outcome because
Anything's possible, but I don't think it is either.
sure, but I'm putting it into the category of a realistic option, not like aliens coming down and showering us with gold. That's possible, I suppose, but I would frame it as highly unlikely.
Yeah, aliens coming down. But this virus is alien in itself.
It is.
It's presented us with the idea that whether it's Yellowstone erupting or a super tsunami or an asteroid or a virus, there are things that are just out of human control.
Excellent
That's
point,
okay.
Zach. Excellent point. And I think it's been very hard for a lot of people to deal with it. And a lot of people have had to construct conspiracy theories to have a very elaborate explanation to explain away the frightening notion that nature occasionally produces something that's trying to fucking kill you. I think a lot of people can't handle that. And so they construct they build very elaborate theories to think about why this is happening, or the Chinese created it, and they're whatever, and I don't rule out the possibility that this is a man-made virus. I don't know that I know enough to make that judgment. There's some people that I've seen, very intelligent people that are wise in the areas of epidemiology, have said that it has earmarks of a manipulated virus. And they were doing that very research in the Wuhan laboratory. It's called gain of function research, where they take a virus and they go, virus, what if we added this and this? Would this virus be able to spread to humans? Just to see what would happen. It's called a gain of function. A lot of people are very politically against gain of function type research. And it's very possible that that virus escaped from there. I don't know. And I don't know that we'll ever know for sure. And in the end, on a certain level, it doesn't matter because you just have to deal with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yep, we're dealing with it. What do you think of the whistleblower, the female out of that Wuhan lab? Have you seen any of her interviews?
Is
I
this the
don't know her
woman they
name off
call?
the
Is
top of my
this
head.
what is which? There's been a couple. What is this whistleblower saying?
I think I saw her on all the major news outlets. Very broken English, but let me see if I could pull up her name. Anyhow, she claims that she was firsthand experience working with this virus in the lab,
Right.
and she can't say that they were the Chinese government or whoever released it on purpose. She just knows that the virus was relatively man-made. And
Was
how
relatively minimal. That's where I think it's going. I'm not going to say that with confidence. I'm going to say just to try to remain not be kookified and remain in civil discourse. I'm going to say that it's possible, a very distinct possibility. But time will tell. Maybe that'll come out. Maybe we'll never know. Maybe she'll end up dead in a ditch for saying that. Usually,
but it happens.
usually governments of all stripes, communist or capitalist or democratic, don't have a problem with taking out someone who's that much of a threat to the narrative. You know,
You're right. Her name is Dr. Li Meng. She's
does
a
she have a
virologist.
nickname? Is she the? She's not the Batwoman, is she? No, that's someone different.
No, let's see here.
Hey, by the way, I sent you my COVID-19 response chart. Did you? It's in the chat. Pull that up, bro. I think I'm gonna guess you're a 4. You gotta pull that up.
Oh, you're gonna make me talk about
I'm gonna
all
make you
my
self-identify.
let's see.
Have you pulled it up?
I think he's doing it right now. Grant's pulling it up. Okay, what's your COVID-19 response number? Let's see here. I'm gonna guess Libertarian, bro. I've got big government taking my freedoms. No, it's definitely not me. I'm unemployed, dangerous pandemic, and I'm doing my part. I would, I can't really take claim to any of these categories.
Well, I did it for humorous. It's mostly a humorous jab at our situation, but there is some accuracy in it, in that some people were responding along these political lines, and I found it kind of funny.
Yeah, I've personally been able to be a little bit more free, not living with any people that have compromised immune systems, being out of the parents' house. The thing that's really hurt me the most is not being able to see my grandma much this year. I have one step grandmother and my real grandmother. Last 2 grandparents, and I haven't really been able to visit them.
I did want to finish one point which I was making. Just real quickly, I'm going to go back to that, and that you quizzed me about, is there this idea to make government look bad? And it's fairly well documented. You can start with the Powell memo. You can start with the fact that lobbying organizations flourished in the mid 70s. They went from like maybe 50 lobbyists to like 500 to later 1,000 lobbying firms in Washington. Essentially, business woke up to the threat the government presented to them through regulation, and they went on the offensive. And that offensive manifests the Reagan administration, which advanced a policy called trickle-down economics, something that his own Republican opponent in the runoff, George Bush, called voodoo economics. But he he snapped to once he was on the team. And essentially what you've had since the 1980s is you've had a government largely run by and for the interests of corporations. And that's what the Republicans have done with it.
You think
And
the Republicans?
absolutely. And the Democrats have helped as well. The Democrats, in the form of Bill Clinton, who, by the way, was a fantastic Republican president. He got rid of welfare. He signed NAFTA. He signed the Federal Communications Act of 1996. You can look all those up. There's a lot more. The Bosnian,
Epstein's Island too.
going to Epstein's Island with Donnie Trump and all the worst James Bond villains of our time. So yeah, the Republicans, the Democrats definitely, I would frame it this way if we want to be really reductionist. Republicans are the party of mega corporations, of multinational corporations. And the Democrats are the party of small corporations and urban professionals. Your dentist to your guy who owns a company with 500 people. That's where the Democrats really represent. And then, the Democrats used to represent labor. They abandoned labor, and that's why labor went to Trump. And currently, America is the only country in the Western world where the labor force is right wing. And part of the reason that's happened is because the Republicans have done such a successful job in admonishing government. They've really gotten the general population, particularly working class males, are just, damn government, and they'll just screw it up. And this was a concerted effort. It was a PR effort, just like the one we were describing with Bernays, because they didn't want the general public to feel like they could turn to their government for redress of their issues. They wanted people to turn to corporations to solve problems. And in that 40-year time span of the Reagan era, and accelerated in Bush and now accelerated in Trump, you've seen a privatization of American government functions. That was the job of Betsy DeVos, the education chairman, or what do you call it, secretary. During the Bush administration, they privatized a lot of war functions out to Halliburton and Blackwater and so forth, you know. So this is the general thrust. To get back to your one question or several questions ago, I do think that some sort of reckoning is due, and I think it comes around the money system, and it comes around the value of the dollar, and it comes around the fact of so much debt that is held by foreign banks of said dollar. And the real big break will come, and I think it'll probably be one of the next shoes to fall, or if the Saudis were to abandon the U.S. The Saudis are planning for a post-oil world. They're building great solar facilities. They're building a really sort of draconian Orwellian city called Neom in the desert that will be a 5G completely wired city with cameras, and everything will be connected to the Internet of Things. You can look that up, Neom, Neom. What some Americans, particularly the Republican Party, has not figured out is that oil and, by its nature, gasoline are on their way out, and that being able to generate the power relatively effortlessly through solar and other means is the way to go. It's just self-evident.
It is. I think we need to invest more in those types of infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And currently, I think it's in the 70 percentile that our entire U.S. system for energy relies on coal.
But there is segments of our population, including my very own home state of West Virginia, one of the most awful states in the country, really an example of the third world inside the United States. I remember the last time I was there, the girl at the 7-Eleven had a shirt that said coal emblazoned across her fat bosom. Essentially, you have all those people who, because they have jobs in the coal mine, want the coal industry, which is 2 generations ago of fossil fuels. It's the dirtiest version of all of them. They're still rooting for that because it serves their self-interest. And this is something that has been a thread running through our conversation, is how do we expect better morality? How do we expect a better response to COVID-19 or to climate change if people are so wrapped up in their personal interests and so wrapped up with meeting that rent? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, it revolves around money, because this is
what it revolves around money, and you've got to have it. And at some point, having more money doesn't necessarily make you happy, but at the low end, if you don't have a certain level, you are going to have a rough life. You have to have a minimum, and people know that. And a lot of people that are struggling, a lot of Trump voters that voted against their own self-interest are struggling out there. The working class is struggling as the nation morphs into the next digital revolution that is happening right in front of us with AI and robots and so on and so forth. The coasts of the nation are already in the 21st century. Parts of the center of the nation, particularly in the farmland, they're still back in the 19th, Zach. Mm-hmm. Well, you get married with a girl coming out of high school, and you're going to work the farm. And hey, there's nothing wrong with those values, but it's not where the society's going. And increasingly, those jobs will be taken by machines. And because all those people in Nebraska and Kansas kept voting for Republicans, and Republicans kept funneling money and benefits towards corporations, now farming is going more and more corporate. The age of the family farm is going away. and you have a lot of gigantic mega corporations saying, all right, Farmer Zach, now you can come to work for us, be here at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and rather than being on your own time, having your own freedom, as a living libertarian example of the American farmer and freedom. Instead, you can come to work for us as an employee.
Gotcha. I wanted to touch real quick on the Republican Party real quick. With
Okay,
money
we've
and
badmouthed them enough.
So I just want to bring up this point of, I think the arguments I hear, it's always the ideology that government is taking something from me. They're taking
Yeah.
my money, they're taking my tax dollars. And I think a solution for that problem, which would build trust and help the parties get along and help citizens' relationship with their government, is more of an itemized list of where your tax dollars are going. And then maybe
Yeah.
if you want your money or a portion of it to go to a specific cause that you deem is
Yeah.
important, you should have the
Yeah.
option to shift some of
That's
the funds.
interesting, Zach. Or
Whereas,
maybe there's like, you pay in a baseline. All right, everybody, this is the baseline to keep it running. But then you can determine what 30 or 40% of your taxes go to. I mean, I doubt they would ever do it with the whole amount, just because certain things would not be funded, and
oh yeah,
they wouldn't get enough
minimum.
money for the military. Even if all the rednecks in Kansas gave all their money to the military while they were waving flags and starving, they still wouldn't have all the money they need for the military. But I think it's an interesting idea. What if you could? Maybe it's even 20%. 20% is discretionary, and you get to put where you want it to go.
Exactly, because I hold this belief, and I hear the argument made a lot in my social circle, to more of a degree of like, "F you, you're not taking my money no matter what" kind of deal.
Well,
I'm
that's a very.
fortunate.
Let
Hold
me
on
just.
one second. I'm fortunate enough to I'm willing to allocate more tax dollars for causes that I think would actually benefit society at large. The problem is a lot of people, including myself, sometimes hold distrust with how the tax dollars are being spent. Are these government systems actually using them for where I want my money to be going, for one, and then for two, how efficiently are they doing it?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's a lot of
like,
bureaucratic ways. I agree with you. That's a good salient point. But I mean, let me just point out it is, I'm absolutely guilty of this at your age. It is somewhat of a condition of young man thinking to say, "Hey, man, I want to hold all of my ducats." Because you're struggling. You haven't built up equity in a company. You don't have assets. You don't have property. Yes, you're essentially at 26 entering the game that is American capitalism. Are you saving money, Zach? Do you have investments? You're probably, knowing you, are a little ahead of the game than the average American young person. But um, as you get older, not everyone, you'll start to realize, you'll start to have a greater sense of your responsibility to the collective. And if you have kids in particular, responsibility to the next generation, even if you don't have kids, okay? And one of the difficulties in creating the reform and change that we have in America is the generational divide. The vast difference in value system between the older and the younger generations. And some of that is just inherent in life. A young man is much more likely to be inspired by a revolution that preaches change and a meritocracy, and we're going to get rid of the old ways, and the class system is gone. Of course, I was that young man. An older man is less inclined to vote for a revolution because he has property and he has investments and so forth, and he's worked hard through an unfair system, the system that he found unfair in his youth. He's dealt with it, he's managed, he's mitigated his losses, and now he's in a comfortable place and is less inclined towards revolution. That's a natural process, it's not created. But then it's also exacerbated by technology. It's exacerbated by technology because you, at the younger generation, you're hipper, you're faster, you're on the socials, you're going to pick up new technology and all that a lot sooner than someone who's older. We have this concept of literacy. America had a real literacy problem up until Lyndon Baines Johnson addressed it during the Great Society. But I mean, that was something. It was like we got to fix that now. To not be literate, that would just be you. You can't even get on the field, so to speak. You know, forget
Unless
about getting an at bat. You know,
social,
you regulated your life to a certain thing, and I'm not judging it because there are folks, particularly immigrants from other countries, like parents of maybe some of our friends, that's where they're at. So I don't mean to belittle it in any way. It's a reflection of where that culture and so forth is on. But what we have is an evolving time structure. We have young people that are. What can your father really teach you about online dating, Zach?
nothing,
Nothing. What could your father teach you today about the jobs of the future?
nothing.
Certain basic principles, don't mean to trash pops altogether. Certain basic principles about how to conduct yourself, how to show up for the interview, how to be a good worker, that stuff still translates. But it's a different game. You're looking for that job on a website. You might have a Zoom call for your interview. The expectations.
You're right. I shouldn't. Sorry to cut you. I shouldn't have said nothing. He definitely has
Yeah,
instilled a lot of good traits in me, and I'm thankful for that. But on your point,
but you know the point I was trying to make, which is the world that he grew up in no longer exists. The world I grew up in at 53 no longer exists,
yeah,
and it will happen to you because of the unending pace of an evolution of technology. You said earlier, I think it was you that maybe it was, I think it was this in our conversation, that the technology is evolving at this rapid pace, but our morality is not. That we still
yes,
have growth to do as individuals. We're still drawn in by petty concerns, by ego, by consumerism or materialism, these sort of shallow manifestations. But technologically, we are barreling forward. Marshall McLuhan says society is like a car barreling forward into the future, but staring into the rearview mirror.
I like that.
Because the technology boom. I mean, society really has completely changed since the invention of the cell phone, the internet, and then social media. That combination of those three or four things, the cell phone is definitely in there, even maybe more than the computer, because the cell phone meant, you traveled with it, which meant it was with you, which meant it changed your environment at all times. Used to be the communication device. The computer was at the house. When you left the house, you left the communication device. Now it comes with you.
Yeah, in the words of Elon Musk, it's an extension of your brain at this point.
It's absolutely an extension
That
of your
that
brain.
is why people get anxiety or will flip their car around if they lose their or if they leave their phone at home, because it's like you were leaving your third arm or a
Eight
piece of.
out of 10 people report phantom rings, which is when you get a little twitch in your leg, a
I
phantom
feel it.
ring.
Yep, I feel it all the time.
Yeah, something like 8 out of 10 feel it. That's a physical psychosomatic reaction to something that's not there because it's there so often, because you get that ring so often and then you get excited, oh, maybe it's her, and you pick it out, and so your brain associates that and it brings it back to you.
Yep. So I wanted to bring up something real quick because you were talking about the fact and the inevitability that older folks tend to not want to have their system disrupted with their property and what have you. But what do you think about the fact of, to coincide with that question, you were talking about taking care of the collective, and then people out in kind of hick be nowhere, no offense anybody out there, kind of just hold their own. Why do you think when populations density rises in cities on the west and east coast, why do these cities tend to lean left? And they have, I mean, by virtue there's more people around, so they have
Okay.
that
Yeah,
mindset.
let me get to it.
Go ahead.
Okay. When you live in a city, you need rules. You need governance. Because, dude, you can't just throw your trash out. Man, this stuff stinks. You can't just, what I mean? Monday's the day they pick that up, right? You need rules. It's sort of like living in a dorm or living with roommates, right? I mean, if you, Zach, lived alone, you don't have to do the dishes tonight or tomorrow. And check your BO. Make sure you freshened up before the show.
Yeah.
If you if you live alone, you don't have to do your dishes. Understand?
Mhm.
If you have roommates, it's a good idea just to keep the sink flowing and people don't get bugged out that they can't prepare their food with the sinks full of dishes, right? When you live in the countryside, where certain services, particularly if you live in wilderness, like say Wyoming votes, I think it's 70 or 75% Republican. It's the most red state. It's also one of the states that has the smallest population. They actually had to give women the vote for Wyoming to become a state because the population was so low and still is. It's high, very cold desert plain and mountains. Not desert, but plain, scrubby plains. People out there live on their own. They have, they have a cattle ranch or whatever, and if they break their leg or something, they're going to have to deal with it. I suppose, at some point they could go to a hospital, but by and large, they're on their own. If there's I don't know, a cougar that's eating up their cattle, they're going to have to deal with it. It's not the cop's job. Okay. So there's just two extreme examples explaining why in the city rules and regulation are needed, and in the countryside they're less needed. Yet we live in one country that all the laws are supposed to be universal in. Another point: people in cities are progressive and they're liberal, they're gay, they're polyamorous, they're I don't know, whatever, BDSM, they're weird, they're libertarian, they're they're into all the weird things that they're into. I mean, what happens, for better or for worse, is a lot of the most creative, most ambitious, prettiest, and smartest people leave the countryside to try their wares in the city. First, they go away to college, right? Okay. And if you live in a depressed area like West Virginia and you're smart, what would be the point of coming back there? Some small percentage do, because they're attached to the physical land for some reason. Fools. But most people, they want to see how far they can get. So you end up with cities being a brain drain for a lot of the rest of the country. Now, that process evolves. A lot of people move to cities when they're young. Populations in cities, I don't know I think they're probably pretty even, but you do have a swelling of young people, whereas you have a bit of an exodus of young people from rural areas. Unless they're going to inherit dad's cattle ranch, or unless they're inheriting the general store, if they're smart, attractive, intrepid, or weird, they want to escape from that area. And also, Zach, very much in those areas, in those rural areas, there is a real resentment of the city because, one, it draws and it sucks away your best and brightest minds. And they have a whole different set of values, which are different and foreign and scary to the folks that live in the sticks and more in the center of the country. You
Those are
understand
all,
what I'm saying?
yeah, absolutely very valid points. I've thought about it from that angle, and I think you're also personally speaking from leaving West Virginia to go
Sure.
settle
My
in,
personal
and then
thing is there, but I don't think it's not. I don't think it's not true for many folks.
no, it's totally true. But I was just thinking of that because it's fascinating. On the flip side, I was born in a busy city suburb area, and how I've thought about it, which both truths coincide amongst
Yeah.
each other, is I feel blessed that I was born in an area that is so diverse. Like, I'm seeing different colors and hues of people growing up, different ways of talking, different slang. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just the mindset of someone being raised in that society, leaning towards more of a group oriented, let's take care of everybody,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more empathetic to other people's.
Sure. And they're exposed to more diversity. Where there's the deepest racism is when there is no diversity.
Exactly.
People are afraid of the other that they don't know. And here's another factor: your television, your media. People that live in the sticks, they get beamed into their home every night, images from the city. Most television and movies, I'm generalizing here, but most television movies are made for and about and by coastal urbanites.
I
The
agree.
doctor in New York, the lawyer in LA.
But then we also get the good old boy in the middle of,
Sure, but very often that character is played for comedy.
yeah, and it But it
You know,
also,
not always. There are shows that venerate that, but not many. Very often, Duck Dynasty, which I don't. I mean, I may have seen 2 minutes of, but it glorifies that character, but it also makes fun of him, and people watch it. Right? Wouldn't you agree?
yeah, yeah. There's so much variation because there's different movies and scenes popping in my head of what was it, Superman in the late
Sure.
80s, some of the Marvel stuff. Like you go to the farm, but it
Yeah.
also has a special place in our hearts to when people get caught
Good
up.
point. And you mentioned Superman, which is the ultimate American Ubermensch, the ultimate American symbolic figure, right? He's the best of us. And where does he start? A farm, is it Nebraska or Kansas? I can't remember.
Either.
And that becomes embossed in the American psyche. This sort of notion that you would have a small town upbringing. But what happens to that character? Clark Kent moves to the city. He lives in Metropolis, I think is the name of the city in the comic. So there again, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Now he always goes back and he venerates his parents, and they gave me the values and all that. Um, Yet, what happens to most people when they move to the city? I think a very brilliant person said, "Reading is a good cure for racism. Travel is a good cure for xenophobia." When you travel and you see things in the world, you realize that people of all colors and races and political persuasions love their children. They enjoy food. They enjoy music. They like getting inebriated in some way on whatever local substance is allowed under their particular government. They enjoy sports. They like laughing, and they like their family. And that's pretty universal. And you know, you see that, and you begin to have empathy and understand. Have you traveled much, Zach?
Not really. I've been pretty much hunkered down since high school, just trying to
It would be
grow.
good. It would be a good to add to your recipe of your
So
personality.
I mean, I've traveled a decent amounts like Mexico, and I almost travel virtually in terms of applying.
Not good. That just not as good.
I mean, in terms of like open mindedness and trying to combat racism and doing my part and just trying to fix different social structures to make people more open minded. But what I was saying is I've been building my life and financial freedom to give me the ability to truly travel and live the life I want to live. Um, and that'll be a never ending process, which I love.
Well, don't wait till you're old to do it. Is my point,
True.
because a lot of Americans is that you. I'm not saying you are, but you could be in danger of falling into a trope. I know lots of my male friends who did this. I'm gonna get financially secure, and then one day I'll do all that traveling. Well, sometimes if you wait too long, you're too old, and two, if you get in the habit of working all the time, that's what you get good at. We get good at what we do a lot of.
I pride myself in being balanced. So in terms of traveling, like I haven't been to Europe per se, but
Yeah,
into
you need
like
to go to Europe.
different states in the United States. But I'm uh I'm definitely I'm not gonna fall into those traps. I actively think about these types of things, and I look forward to not just one day. I'm gonna definitely travel the world. I want to experience as
Good.
many things as
I
possible.
hope you do, because it's very rewarding. Get to some weird places too.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a positive note, like you were saying, the commonalities amongst different people who speak different languages from different parts of the world, they all hold certain things to be true, and laughter and love and all these different things. On a positive note, do you have any hope that in our political system and with our leadership, that in our lifetime there is going to be a figure that whether they're elected Democrat, Republican, or moderate, I hope one day we can start electing true centrists and moderates that are weighing and measuring and trying to balance out both sides and solve these problems that shouldn't be treated like you're
Well,
rooting for your football team.
I
It's
agree.
much more complex.
Again, thank you for the opportunity that you've given me to trash the Republican Party again.
Are
I
you?
think you have a deeply obstructionist Republican Party that doesn't want any laws to be passed. This goes back to what I'm saying. They're against government. They don't want government to work. In fact, I mean, that's not just my conjecture. It was in their stated policy during the Obama administration. We're going to block everything this guy does. We're not giving him any points on the board. You follow me?
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine the people in these seats though, who are educated, critical thinkers. I would imagine. What is causing that type of mindset? Is it the fact that these
Win
jobs?
at all cost and money.
So do you?
Win at all costs and money, and then and also of course ego. People get caught
So,
up in this place of
so
thinking
real quick. So with that being said, what you just said, the ego part, would you say these types of political jobs simply attract a specific type of person,
very good point. I would say that you know
or do they get corrupted sometimes once they enter the system? Maybe.
no, well, I think both are true. As we said before, it's in often cases it's both are true and or okay. Psychologists tell us that sociopaths make up about 5% of the population. Okay, there's a great book you can read. I believe it's called The Sociopath Next Door. And sociopaths are a great interest in study today. And then, of course, there are people who are narcissists, which are a lesser version of a sociopath. And there are even a few extreme cases of a psychopath. Sociopaths are disproportionately represented in our CEO-ships, and I would imagine presidents and very strong political leaders.
Interesting. I've never thought of that before.
Yeah, you should look into that. The numbers are very startling. So the species seems to be producing at roughly a 5% rate these individuals. Now, what makes a sociopath is an area where there is some debate, at least as I understand it. I think they are made to some extent. I think it's the unfortunate combination of a certain type of personality with bad parenting. Okay, I'll give you one real simple thing. For the sociopathic mind, they often have parents who only value them when they do well. So if they get an A on the test or they hit a home run on the baseball team, that's when they're oh, look at my son, and it's very much a showpiece. But when they're sad or hurt, or when they're lost and need understanding and a hug to get through the day, those parents aren't there. They're busy. They're there when they're there to give rewards when achievements are made. And so that develops in the mind of the sociopath that the winner is the dominant force in our society. From a young age, their caretakers establish that thought pattern in them. You understand?
I do. And it's sad because I'm hopeful, but I have thought about this before in terms of a problem solver out there in the community that m- might be enlightened to run for president one day or to be a governor because they truly want to invoke change. I think the vast majority of them see it as an impossible job and just end up steering to the private industry because it's easier. You're facing a problem that sometimes people don't think could be solved, and that leads people with pure ego and power hungry people to maybe take those positions of leadership. I mean, for example, Gavin Newsom in California. I always try to envision these leaders. Like if I was sitting across from a dinner table with them, like would I truly like them if I actually got to know them, not through media, not through sound bites, but what type of person are they? And when I hear him speak, um, it reminds me of like a Gotham mayor, like in a Batman movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was just caught at a party.
Yeah, that was a bad luck.
Not good at all. Or Nancy Pelosi. And I don't know whether everyone there was tested because I'm a believer too. If you want to host these events, there's a way to do it logistically. Get everyone tested, services are clean, what have you, and then you can
Yeah, there's a way to make it safer. It wouldn't eliminate all risks, but certainly you're right.
the mistrust in our leaders. There has to be, and this goes with cops too. It goes with community outreach. It goes with
Yeah.
coming off like a real person, like if you were sitting
Well,
across at a dinner
you
table.
you mentioned cops. Some percentage of cops go into it because they are a kind of like you might have had a dude in your neighborhood who was just kind of a good dude who saw problems, and maybe he was a little bigger and everybody looked up to him. That kind of energy, that kind of guy who wants to be a soldier or a fireman. I think the Indonesians call it Garuda energy, which is the secure, the provider, the guardian. But that's only a percentage. And there's a bunch that go into it because they're ex-military and now they have no other skills because they're a Marine and they basically got trained to kill. Okay, they got trained to use their physical body to brutalize others. There's a certain percentage that are want to brutalize others. As one cop once told me, it's the only job where I get to shoot people.
Jesus.
Okay, those folks exist too,
They all do.
and are often cultivated because, you know, those kind of ravenous dogs to have at your disposal are always something desirable. If you are to use the animal farm analogy, if you're a pig who's running a mafia, you got to have some dogs that are going to beat down the population when they rise up. So, is it possible? Yes, of course it's possible, Zach. I feel you grasping for some sort of hope here, and of course it's possible. I mean, nothing is cast in stone. The future is uncertain, but the trends are quite dire, and they some of the issues are endemic in the culture. True, Donald Trump has failed the American public in its response to COVID-19. That's to me undeniable. But the American people have also failed themselves. Their desire and need for freedom. I had a friend this weekend who said, "Yeah, I'm going to hop on a plane and go to see my girl in Colorado for Thanksgiving." And you know what? Hey, that's his right. I didn't give him a hard time, but I was like, "Dude, what day are you traveling?" "Oh, Wednesday." That's the most traveled day of the entire year, Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I mean, like, wow, you're just, you're not doing your best to try to, take a red eye and maybe there's less people in the airport. You're just sort of acting like nothing's going on. And so, you know, point being, we have had all Western nations. Let's broaden our critique to Europe as well. Most Western nations have had a really difficult time with people who are used to doing whatever they want, being told they got to wear a mask or have a curfew at 10. And believe me, look at some of the things that Europe's doing. Wow, there's like in Europe you can't be out after 10. You got to have a permission slip. For a while in Italy, you had to have a permission slip if you moved beyond 100 yards from your house. It got real over there in a way that we have no idea.
Yep, you're definitely right. So I'm gonna wrap it up with this question of,
Okay, yeah, I think I had one more left in me, but I'm fading.
in your opinion, what is the most prevalent issue that we're facing, not just in the United States, but people all around the world? Um,
Well, the obvious choice is climate change. I mean, it should be evident to you that that the climate is getting more and more extreme. I think last week, maybe even just a couple of days ago, LA had. Are you in LA, Orange County?
Orange County.
Yeah. What was the weather a couple of days? It wasn't like eight. It was like 80 or 90 in LA. It was really
There was
warm.
a big spike for a couple days. It
Yeah.
went from a high of 68 to a high of, it was like a 30-degree temperature change.
Sure. And these are anecdotal evidence, so maybe a climate scientist would say, well, you can't really judge it by that. But it's what I perceive is you're seeing more extreme examples of climate. So your hurricanes season is longer, there's more of them, and they're more severe and contain more water. Okay, the flooding that we've had all throughout the southeast has really been bad this year. The fires in the west, and now it's spread to Oregon. I'm up in Oregon, and I've noticed several dry lakes. You wouldn't think of Oregon as having dry lakes, but I've seen them all throughout the Cascades. And my friends tell me, well, that's just normal. They'll fill up and then they get drained through the summer. Okay. So, whatever conditions that are in your area, I think will be pushed to extremes. So, places that are cold will be brutally cold. Places that have storms will have really nasty storms. And I think in just a few years' time, that will become so prevalent, I would say within 5 to 10, 10 at the outside, that it will become so prevalent that life almost cannot but to conduct itself around said crises. In fact, let's be honest, we're already there. How did this year begin? The people fleeing into the ocean in Australia, running away from fires. I mean, they had like unbelievable, this huge swaths of land just burning. It was like there was nothing they can do. It was too big and it was out of control. And people just literally ran into the ocean to avoid being burned on the beach. That was how this year began. This summer, the fires that happened here. I mean, It's getting worse. I would say now I don't. When I've been traveling around California in the West since I got here, 18 years, and in the last 5 years, I'm like, August, September, where do I want to be? Because if I'm going to be in the woods, I got to be really careful. And sure enough, this very summer, I was camping and hiking in the Sierras, and 1 week later, the fire, it's called the Creek Fire, sparked up there, and people that were where I was had to be airlifted out. Pretty high up, around 7,000, 8,000 feet. This place that I go to camp. And had I been there, what I'm saying is I would have been locked in because the fire started down the mountain, and all those folks couldn't get out unless they went immediately. And that could have been me, but for a week. So my point is, in that anecdotal evidence, is that it's encroaching on our everyday life more and more and more every day. And pretty soon we're not going to be able to put it off or say, oh, all the models that they've had that they thought this is how it's going to be in 2050, they're ahead of those now.
Yep.
And then you're getting into something, the real risk to me, and the one that's the scariest, is what I would call asymmetric, out of control climate change. So, for example, with the permafrost in the northern parts in Canada, for example, as that thaws, well, there's methane in there, and the methane is released, and the methane is worse than CO2. So the more the methane is released, the warmer the atmosphere gets. So the more permafrost that melts. You follow me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I
And
think it's
so,
important for people to think about climate change in the correct way, because I'm definitely not a climate denier.
yeah,
And deductively, humans are having an impact on the environment just by virtue of removing fossil fuels that are tucked underneath the ground and
and
releasing
burning them.
them into the air. You have just from a very basic, don't have to think about it too hard. There is going to be some sort of effect. The
Yeah,
What you do is you measure the effect, and people like to make the argument like, oh, there's been more CO2 in the atmosphere from volcanic activity or from more fires that have occurred in previous generations, which they can measure based on rock levels and what have you. But what I always ask people is it's the idea of, with what is happening and what might get worse, are we going to be able to sustain the way we are currently living, with homes
no,
being located
no.
near large coastal, exactly, and weather patterns, and if we can mitigate potential damage
I
from
think that mitigation is where we're at. I think that what the future generations will be doing is not reversing climate change, although perhaps that technology could be. I mean, let's be a little optimistic. Humans have invented their way into a lot of problems, and they invented their way out of them. But every new technology you create creates waste, and it has unintended outcomes. So I think that mitigation strategies, and it may change how we have to live, Zach. There may be places where you don't live. You can't build that amazing second home deep in the forest of the Sierras, because guess what? You had to cut down trees to do it, and it's the forests are just going to burn. You can't build that third home on that barrier island in Florida because the very act of building the home is erosive. You know what I mean? We need to just let that place be wild. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. I would imagine it's going to involve a lot less humans.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that we're gonna be able to engineer our way out of the problem, but it's a common thread, just like with consuming unhealthy food, is the fact that because it's not an immediate threat like a meteorite striking, which
Yeah,
would light a fire under everyone's ass to problem solve, it's a distant problem. It's in the future. Therefore,
correct. And here you get to. I had to stand up. Here you get to an issue which is just basic human psyche. I mean, here is where we're damaged. This is why cell phones are so addictive, because there's something in the human psyche. It's called psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. It's why slot machines are popular. It's why gambling, like it's why there's just something about the Rubik's cube. It's solving a problem. For me, it's chess. I have a chess game on my computer on my phone, and I play it on. I'll play a game while I'm waiting at a red light. You know, and the point being, there's something in our psyche which likes that, and the slot machine plays into that, and the notices from our cell phone play into that. So there are these inherent psychological proclivities, I'll call them, and you just raised another one, which is something that isn't in front of us. I mean, people get real serious about COVID-19 when someone they know gets it. That's when people will. That's when it really will tighten up. Is when it gets to the point, and we're getting there now. We're in exponential growth of the virus to where that will occur. But that's when most people really start to take it seriously. And some nebulous thing that might be happening in 2040, and it's hard for most people to wrap their heads around. Not to mention the fact they're extremely busy. They have stressful lives. They have children, wives, and it's modern life ain't easy. It's very complex.
It is, but I'm hopeful that we're gonna make it out on the other end.
Oh, we're gonna make it out. That I'm not concerned about. Human society will go on. I just think it will be a vastly different state, and probably a diminished one for a while from where we are now, only to have a golden age at the end.
Golden age.
You'll be more likely to see it than I will, Zach.
With technology, I think you're going to be around a long time.
That's right.
To get them stem cells. Take a trip down to Panama, get the intravenous stem cells, and you'll add a couple, like a decade on.
Sure. Just have a transfusion of baby's blood. Just put it right in there.
All right, Professor Dew. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for all the insight and your opinions on solving some of these prevalent.
I hope I did okay.
You did a great job. No, it was a cool conversation. I enjoyed it.
We went all over the place. You'll edit out the part where I lost my train of thought, won't you, please?
Grant? We'll see. No, it wasn't that bad at all.
Depends on what Grant's opinion of my political positions are. Anyway, it was a pleasure.
In the corner of my eye, he was nodding along with a lot of things.
Good. He's a smart boy. Anyway, it was a pleasure, and I'm honored that you asked me. And I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I encourage you to keep going. I like your attitude. I like your positivity. And I like your open mind. And I think you're a credit to your generation for that reason, and to your parents and your upbringing. And I wish you the best, sir.
I appreciate it very much, and we'll talk soon.
All right, take care.
You too.